If at any point you have a question you would like to have asked, please press star 3. If you would like to subscribe to our office's newsletter, please press star 6. Again, that is star 3 for a question and star 6 to be added to the newsletter. I'd now like to turn it over to Congresswoman Johnson for an opening statement.
Hello, everyone. It's Congresswoman Julie Johnson, and I am so thrilled to be with you tonight and so proud to be able to represent Texas 32 here in the United States Congress. It's been a very busy 6 weeks since we first got sworn in and since we've been here in D.C. We're finally at full staff, and there's been a lot happening. I know that many of you have a lot of concerns and a lot of questions about what has been going on with the Trump administration and have a lot of issues that I'm going to try to address tonight. I also have as a special guest Trustee Monica Lira-Bravo, who is an expert on immigration. She also is an immigration lawyer and is going to be available to answer specific questions you may have about ICE and immigration issues if you have any questions about that. So please get those ready and submit to the queue. But first, I'm going to address what's been going on in the Trump administration and try to answer some of your questions. If you have a question tonight, please hit star 3. And if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, we have great content coming out. Our folks work really hard on. Please hit star 6 so that you can stay in contact with our office. So as you know, Trump has engaged in a plan of chaos, muzzle velocity, as they have said, to try to flood the zone, flood the airwaves, and flood our minds with as much chaos and disruption as possible to try to keep us off balance, to keep us from being able to fully resist, to keep us from being focused, and all of those things. And, you know, it worked a little bit, but we are gaining ground, and Democrats are really rallying together, and I think you'll see a lot of things have happened. There are some issues of things that really come clearly squarely within presidential authority and presidential power. And then there's been a lot of actions that he has taken, in my opinion, do not fall within presidential authority and presidential power, but more importantly fall within the role and the power of Congress. So an example of the things that come within the scope of his presidential authority would be presidential pardons. The presidential pardon power is vast, it's broad, and it's unlimited. And so one of the first things, as we all know, that President Trump did was pardon all of the J6 rioters and conspirators. And he was fully within his right to do so. It's disappointing. It's an insult to law enforcement. It's an insult to the rule of law. It's an insult to the peaceful transfer of power. But he had the full legal right to be able to do that. And so there's really little that we can do about that other than call out the hypocrisy of supporting law enforcement and standing for rule and order in the face of that. One of the first other things he did was issue a federal funding freeze of all grants and beneficiaries. Now, this was going to have a significant impact on many, many organizations and many agencies. These kinds of pause would include grants for Head Start, for early childhood education, for domestic violence survivors, law enforcement, Meals on Wheels, and many other really fabulous programs. If these cuts were implemented, Texans would see a significant decrease in the services that they were able to access, leaving families and our most vulnerable neighbors in a state of heightened uncertainty. As it stands right now, we have been able to stop these cuts from going into effect by virtue of a lawsuit brought by several Democratic attorneys general. One of the issues that has come up that I want to address is who has standing to bring a lawsuit and who does not have standing to bring a lawsuit. Members of the United States Congress in the minority party, do not have standing to bring a lawsuit. It is well-established jurisprudence in that regard. So as much as the Democratic members of the House of Representatives would love to file a lawsuit, we are not able to do that. Instead, we collaborate and we work with other litigation partners to try to determine who has the best standing in order to bring these suits. And in this particular case, it was Democratic attorneys general, and the courts have held that there is now currently a TRO about this. You know, these issues, the problem is many of these contracts are contracts negotiated by the federal government. People have made procurements, they've made hirings, they've in the middle of clinical trials, they're in the middle of all sorts of programs based on a commitment that the United States government is going to fund a particular activity. And it was all approved by Congress. And let me remind you, these funding measures were approved by Republicans and Democrats in the United States Congress and by the Senate and signed by President Biden. And so these are full and effectual laws, and the administration, the courts have clearly said, at least at this point, does not have the unilateral authority to bypass the power of the purse given to Congress under Article 1 of the Constitution. Another issue that he has done is birthright citizenship. In his very first days, he signed an unconstitutional executive order to try to eliminate birthright citizenship, which basically says if you are born in this country, then that means you are a citizen of this country, regardless of the citizen status of your parents. This is something that is granted by the 14th Amendment, and it cannot be changed by executive order. The president does not have the ability to change the United States Constitution by executive order. It has to go through the constitutional amendment process, which obviously he has not done. 8 lawsuits have been filed. They have all issued TROs banning and stopping this birthright citizenship order as non-constitutional. So there is his second overreach that he has been stopped. Another issue that he has done is funding for the National Institute of Health and medical research funding. What he's done, he has halted, again, very critical research funding that goes to a lot of our universities and that does very important medical research, trying to change a cost allocation formula of what can be used for expenses and the like. Many universities stand to lose in the hundreds of millions of dollars of previously booked research grants and commitments, and will have a devastating effect on our universities of higher learning and these important research. You know, United States has led the world in medical research and curing important diseases, and without this funding, it will be stopped. Again, there are 2 lawsuits that have been issued with restraining orders stopping the Trump administration, again, from implementing and slashing the NIH cuts. And so the third time now, the courts have stopped him. Another issue, as we all know, is his fork in the road, $2 million federal employee buyout offer. On January the 28th, Trump sent a notification to nearly 2 million federal employees, offering them an opportunity to resign their posts. And he did this, let's be clear, so that he can fire long-term career civil servants who would be in a position to report ill-doing on his part and to try to replace them with his cronies and people who are going to continue to serve his very dangerous agenda. This is an attempt to scare patriotic federal workers, but the good news is that many of them were not scared, many of them did not take his offer, and many of them remain in their employment at this time. Initially, there was a judge, another court, and a lawsuit brought by federal labor unions that they were issued a TRO. However, ultimately, one of those lawsuits was reversed today, saying that the labor unions themselves did not have standing since the labor unions were not federal employees directly. And what is standing? It's a word you're going to hear a lot as we talk about these lawsuits and these attempts to stop the Trump administration. It's standing is basically a legal term for who has the right to bring a lawsuit. Not everyone can sue for whatever they want to. You have to be in a position to bring that lawsuit. So, for example, here, the labor union is not an employee of the federal government. Sally Smith, who might be a member of the labor union, is the employee of the federal government. Sally Smith would have standing, but not the labor union directly. And so that's kind of where we are in that case. Unfortunately, time will be told as to what's going to happen. You know, our federal government will cease to exist and not work properly if we all of a sudden lose 2 million federal workers. There will be no one to process Social Security checks. There will be no one to process Medicaid checks. There will be no one to process veterans benefits. We'll have a host of problems if that ultimately happens. So time will be told in terms of exactly what the next steps are for our federal workforce. USAID. USAID is an important governmental agency that helps people around the world. They focus things like ending hunger, supporting women, providing support after natural disasters, and so much more. USAID plays a really critical role in keeping us safe and preventing terrorism from growing and uplifting democratic governments throughout the world. Today, as I sit on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, we had a hearing just today on Trump's illegal attempt to gut and eliminate the entire agency. If the Trump is successful and we pull back on our commitments, we'll see China, Russia, and other foreign adversaries fill the gap of global leadership vacuum, which puts Americans' lives at risk and makes us less safe. Recognizing this, Trump's illegal actions, a judge has blocked the administration at this time from placing thousands of USAID employees on administrative leave and reinstated 500 employees. Unfortunately, however, the Trump administration has, at this point, ignored restrictions on the USAID program and has still cut off hundreds of millions of dollars of aid funding. And we're in a battle royale about getting that funding reinstated, but at this point, it has not been. Many agencies and organizations throughout the world who depend on the United States, who've relied on the United States, are being let down by the United States. And we all have to raise up our voices and bring and highlight this issue because it's really a travesty. We have the FBI. In late January, Trump fired all of the prosecutors in the January 6 criminal cases, and he's asked for the names of all the FBI agents involved in any Trump investigation. Trump is attempting to gut the federal law enforcement agency and use it as his own personal police force and dismiss anyone who in any way had any participation of investigating anything to do with Trump in any of the matters that he's been under investigation for. Again, a lawsuit was been brought by employees of the FBI, and a judge has blocked these firings, and the administration is under a restraining order from proceeding with any further terminations of the FBI at this time. And the list goes on. We have the Consumer Financial Protection Agency. The CFPB is a critical agency to make sure that our citizens in this country are not taken advantage of by banks and lending institutions, credit card companies, and more. Across all 50 states, the CFPB has returned over $17.5 billion to wronged customers. That includes addressing over 410,000 complaints just from Texans alone. Trump is trying to shutter the entire agency, mainly because it was formulated by Elizabeth Warren, but also because the CFPB has been investigating Musk and many others. Now, at this point, labor unions like the National Treasury employee unions have sued. We are expecting rulings in that case. No rulings have happened at this time. We are expecting a favorable ruling consistent with how the courts have been ruled in many of these other cases. Let's move on to DOJ. As many of you know, Trump has tasked Elon Musk to go into the government and try and dismantle agencies and departments, which is completely unconstitutional and illegal. One of these issues I've heard about the most from you is regarding Elon Musk having access to the Treasury payment system and to your personal Social Security and Medicare payments. The last thing we want is for Elon Musk to have, or any other unauthorized person, to have access to this data and to weaponize the United States Treasury to decide who does and who does not get the benefits. Can you imagine what would happen if they had some tech person try to do some algorithm to decide Republicans are going to get their benefits, but Democrats are not going to get their benefits? Again, lawsuits have been filed, and they are currently under a TRO to restrict access. They are not allowed. They're in a read-only phase, and it's limited to 2 people. But this is still going to be a very contentious litigation environment that we're going to be watching closely. I'm also very concerned that we're about to learn that Trump is going to try to dismantle the Department of Education and shutter it as well. We anticipate these announcements to come out in the very coming days. Again, lawsuits will be prepared to stop this action as well. He does not have the unilateral power to just close the complete entire agency of government approved by the Congress. That is not within his executive powers, and we will be watching that situation very closely. As a reminder, if you have questions, please press *3. And again, a plug for our newsletter, *6, and we'd love to get you signed up. Some other deadlines that we have coming up are March 14th, the government will cease to be funded. The Republicans, as you know, control all the houses of government. They, at this point, have been unable to agree on a budget. Whether or not we have a continuing resolution to continue the government funded, at this point, I'm not optimistic. The initial budget that was put out today calls for an increase of our federal deficit of $4 trillion. And that's mainly due to tax cuts that Trump is trying to put forth for his wealthy friends at the expense of the American people. And we will be having a very large and significant fight over the budget. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the government does not get funded at this time, and if we do have a governmental shutdown due to the stakes of what has been involved at this point. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Monica Lira-Bravo. As I said, she is a Dallas College Board of Trustee representing District 4. We're so thrilled and honored to have her on our call today. She's a board certified in immigration and nationality law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, and she's the owner and managing attorney of Lira-Bravo Law. And so I wanted to give her a few minutes to kind of give us a summary of where we are with immigration issues that are very concerning to many in our state, and then we will turn it over to questions. So Monica, please take it away.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for inviting me on this. And yes, today I'm here more as an attorney than as a trustee. And obviously since January 20th, we have seen much change in the immigration field. There are over 80 different policy actions that the Trump administration has taken, most of them through executive order. But like Congresswoman Johnson mentioned, many of them are tied up in litigation. For example, the birthright citizenship, the ending of CBP1, that unfortunately is still, that one has not been enjoined. The ending of CBP1 basically prevents people from being able to request asylum from outside the country. In terms of refugee case processing, that has also been placed on hold. And so we have very much a humanitarian crisis on our hands, as well as with enforcement. And so enforcement, I feel like it's the topic that most of the people that I talk to have questions about, because obviously one of the executive orders basically says that ICE can now basically prioritize any person who's in the country without legal status and process them for deportation. And so that, of course, has caused lots of fear and uncertainty in our community. And so that is the topic that I hear the most questions about. So I'll spend a little bit of time focusing on that, as well as just also want to tell you the lay of the land on DACA. And so deferred action for childhood arrivals has been in litigation for pretty much since its inception. And right before January 20th, the Fifth Circuit did rule that the program was unlawful. But at the same time that they ruled that, they also enjoined their own decision and stayed pending an appeal. So although we do have a court decision saying DACA is unlawful, you are still able to renew your work permit and keep your DACA status. But obviously, we do know that that will be appealed. That will go back up to the Supreme Court, and so it does not look positive for DACA status. Now, in terms of enforcement, here locally in North Texas, there have been no ICE raids as of yet. What we have seen in the numbers are, ICE is continuing what they did prior, and they're continuing to detain people. And so far, what we have seen is because of the limited resources of ICE locally, by and large, the people they have been picking up have been people with criminal records. And so what does that mean? That means people who are have gone to the local jails because of some criminal arrest, and also people who have been serving probation. There have been many reports of ICE picking those people up at their probation appointments. And then the other group that has been targeted is people who have outstanding deportation orders. In the past, when somebody had a deportation order, if they went into a check-in to basically say, here I am, I'm not hiding, I'm complying with the law, they would be able to request what's called a stay of removal to try and stop their deportation. Now, under the Trump administration, even if you show you're complying with the law and that you're doing everything to try to fix your status, you're now being taken into custody while they decide what to do with you. And unfortunately, in many cases, these people are being deported before their stay of removal can even be considered. And so, one of the big things, that I tell my clients is that there are things you obviously can do to prepare for, possible either ICE raid or just, having the bad luck of having ICE either come to your place of work, to your home, or, if you're just driving. And so, we try to advise people to know their rights, because everybody has rights under our Constitution, regardless if you have citizenship status or not. And we also are recommending people to prepare family preparedness packets, which are basically legal documents that help guide decisions for your family, and that's decisions regarding your children, if you have minor children, and both parents do not have legal status. It's also to provide paperwork for your property in the event that you were to be detained or deported and you needed to dispose of property, and that could be either your home, that could be your cars. There's different legal documents that can be prepared to do that, where you can designate a person to be able to help you with that. So one of the biggest topics is obviously, what are my rights if ICE were to come to my home? And so the main things that we like to remind people is if ICE comes to your home, and that could be an immigration officer, that could be the police. In either case, in order to be able to enter your home, they need to have a valid warrant, and that warrant needs to be signed by a judge or magistrate. Many times, because ICE is a civil enforcement agency, they will have a document that might say very on the top warrant, but it's signed by an ICE officer. It's not signed by a judge. That's the very first thing. They have to have that, and obviously you also have to give them permission to enter. So if they come to your door and knock, you have the right to not open the door. You can obviously ask them for identification. If they say they have a warrant, you can ask them to, show you the warrant, to maybe pass it under your door. And obviously, you want to make sure that, you see it. And if obviously it's a valid warrant, then at that point, they would be able to enter. But also at the same time, we always like to remind people that you do have the right to remain silent. But again, in most situations when ICE is coming to your house, the warrant that they have, more than likely it's not going to be signed by a judge. So that's the main thing, that you want to familiarize yourself with those documents. And again, that could be the police, that could be immigration. It's the same rules that apply for entering your home. Another situation that I know has people very concerned is, what rights do I have if I were to come to a school or college? And so unfortunately, we're kind of in new terrain when it comes to schools, because up until this recent Trump administration, schools and churches were considered protected, sensitive locations where ICE could not enter. And that was just a policy that ICE always respected. And so if they did not enter schools, they did not enter churches. Unfortunately, the sensitive location memo has been rescinded. And so even ICE, honestly, I don't think really knows what to do in these situations. And I mean, they really, I don't think, want to go to a school. But again, the same rules that would apply in your home would apply in a school. And so honestly, it's going to be up to those school officials to really be well versed on these laws, and to know, hey, if you're coming into my school and my campus, please show me a legal document showing you have the authority to come here and look for X person. And so there's a lot of local groups who are trying to just educate schools, colleges in this territory, because again, they've never had to navigate through this. But now, obviously, with everything that's happening, there are a lot of parents who are not sending their children to school for fear that their children or themselves could be detained, when they go and when they're dropping off their children at school, when they're picking them up, or if the kids themselves do not have legal status. And so, we're doing our best to try and educate school officials to basically know these same laws. Obviously, nobody's saying don't follow the law. We're saying, if you're coming onto a campus, make sure that the person who is who they are, one verify that it's an immigration officer, that they have the valid identification, identify that it's a warrant signed by a judge or magistrate, and then at that point, they would have to go. But since this has happened, we have not really seen or heard stories of them going to a school. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but I mean, I think really it goes there to the person in charge. I can tell you that locally for Dallas College, the way the college has decided to navigate this is to have, law enforcement or ICE come to our campus. Our local Dallas College police know that they need to direct that law enforcement agency or agent to the campus president, and then it would be the campus president who would have the obligation to review the warrant if there is a warrant. Obviously, if there's no warrant, then that's basically the end of the conversation. If there is a warrant, they would verify it and then go from there. So each school district, each college is basically navigating this on their own right now, unfortunately. And hopefully, we don't hear too many episodes of this happening, but I do know that that is something that is causing great fear in our community. And then obviously, the other area where people need to know their rights is, at their place of work. Because normally when immigration does do big raids, they're at the work site. In those situations, again, they need to have a warrant. It needs to have the correct signatures on it. And then, if for whatever reason they were to come to your place of work and they were to come looking for you, always remember that you have the Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate yourself. And besides showing identity documents, you don't really have to comply with anything else, unless you're in custody. And then at that point, you would want to seek representation so that somebody could help advocate for you. And so that's just a little bit of what's going on. Obviously, there are so many different things that are going on right now with immigration, but those are some of the basic things I like to cover. I'll just mention briefly about the family preparedness packet, what that typically entails. Typically, what you want to have is a power of attorney. A power of attorney is a legal document where you can designate a person to do things on your behalf, and in that those are legal things. That's like doing real estate transactions for you. That's accessing your bank account if you need money, and you can always designate that power of attorney to only take effect in certain circumstances. So it's not like you're giving that person all your rights right now. It's just in the event of something happening to you, that person could then step in your place and do things in your name. We also are recommending to get a letter of where you designate an alternate guardian for your children in the event that you were not able to pick them up from school, or you were not able to get them to where they need to. You can give another person authority to make decisions for your children on your behalf. And again, these documents do not take effect right away. It would only be in the case where you would not be able to take care of your children. There are several nonprofits who are getting together to do workshops specifically to prepare these documents. I know of two coming up. One of them will be at the Mexican consulate, and we consider the Mexican consulate a safe space because obviously it's foreign territory. So ICE does not have any authority to enter that building. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to the Congresswoman.
Yeah, thank you so very much. That was a lot of information. I hope you on the call found it helpful. And Monica has graciously agreed to stay on the remaining of the call. If you have any other additional questions, again, please hit *3 to ask a question. And our shameless plug for our newsletter, *6. Please do that as well. I also wanted to make you aware of, on our website, we have a form, Federal Freeze Impact Form. One of the things that is going to be really critical as we move into these next stages is storytelling. Impact, as we discussed earlier in the call, standing is really important. I went to a meeting this morning of a bunch of lawyers who are members of Congress, and as many of you know, I am a lawyer of 33 years as myself, trying to strategize on different legal strategies to go forward with. But one of the things that is universal is we must tell the stories of the impact. So we made it super easy. There's a form on our website. You can always call our office. And with that, I think, Thomas, let's open it up for questions.
Thank you. We will now begin to answer your questions. The first question comes from Allie from Richardson. She says, I'm concerned about Trump defying court orders. What can you do to make sure he follows court orders?
Yes, you, Allie, and a lot of folks on this call have that same question. It's a serious question, and it will actually put us into a full-blown constitutional crisis if he ignores the Supreme Court, the most conservative Supreme Court, and what we'll ultimately have. At the end of the day, what we have is, as you know, he has broad pardon power, but that only is for criminal matters. He doesn't have the ability to issue civil pardons. So the judicial branch can issue contempt and civil contempt of anyone that aids and abets the continued violation of the law, which includes Elon Musk and any other employee of the federal government. And so I'm anticipating that what we'll see is a series of civil contempt issues and orders, which can be up to fines. It can include time in jail. It can be any number of items. And you can see that they are anticipating this J.D. Vance started talking about the rogue judiciary, and they're starting to now get ahead of this narrative of our judicial branch, and that, and many of these judges, by the way, for your own talking points, who are issuing all these opinions are Republican-appointed judges, conservative jurists appointed by Republican presidents, confirmed by Republican Congresses, who are outraged at what is happening. And, in fact, the judge on the birthright citizenship is a Reagan appointee, said, how can any member of the bar stand before my court and tell me that this is a constitutional act? And so I think we're seeing the judicial branch enraged by that. But the reality of it is our Constitution is somewhat silent on what happens when you have a complete branch of government. One of the other options is obviously impeachment, right? That's sort of the built-in safeguard for a rogue president or a president that doesn't follow the law, is impeachment by the Congress and confirmation by the Senate. As we all know, President Trump was impeached, has been impeached. The Senate did not convict, which is why we are back in this predicament. Now, what's the likelihood of impeachment? We have a Republican-controlled House, a Republican-controlled Senate, so that option is off the table. But that is the constitutional safeguard. But I guess that option doesn't have to be off the table if Republicans are outraged enough by the blatant disregard of judicial orders. So time will tell on what can be done there, and we'll just be watching it. We have to screen protests, and there has to be, honestly, there has to be extreme outrage from the citizens, from you, from people across the country, if that happens.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you want to ask a question, please press *3. If you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6. The next question comes from Isabel from Plano. She says, Trump seemed to attack the USAID and just close the department. How can we get this reopened and get people their jobs back? This is a national security concern for me.
Well, Isabel, thank you for that question, and I completely agree with you. This is a huge national security concern, and as I mentioned earlier, we just had a hearing about this very issue this morning in our Foreign Affairs Committee. And during that committee, Democrats stood up one after one after one to defend USAID and the work we do to keep our nation safe. USAID is one of the stabilizing programs that we have, but at the end of the day, it's going to take lawsuits. You're going to hear this theme from me. Unfortunately, the lawsuit process is really going to be the main avenue that we have. That's why we have checks and balances in our government. And so the Congress writes and passes the laws, and the executive is supposed to enforce the law, and the judicial branch is the great arbiter to make sure that everybody is staying within their lanes. And so that's why 85 lawsuits have been filed to date over the Trump administration's recent actions, and more are continued. We're also working on a robust amicus brief program and engaging with lawyers across the country to file even more actions. So that's where we are with USAID.
Thank you. The next question comes from Kiana from Dallas. I'm a teacher in Dallas, and I'm worried about Trump taking away education funding and attacking the Department of Education. What can be done to stop this?
Well, I think, again, the presidency does not have the ability to completely wholesale eliminate a constitutionally created department of government. The Department of Education provides critical grant funding to our universities and to our schools that really enhance our education and keep our kids safe as well. It's really interesting. As you all know, in Texas, we're undergoing a massive school voucher fight in the Texas legislature. And so this really highlights the need for engagement in that fight as well, because most education policy is done at the state level. That's the vast majority of where it happens. The federal Department of Education certainly regulates, has guidelines and standards for curriculum, but most of that happens at the state level. And so I think that what we're also seeing is Republican states, and it wouldn't surprise me if Texas joined in this, welcome this. They don't want the reporting, they don't want the test standards, they don't want to have the ongoing requirements for disability issues and all the other things that come around with federal law. They would like to be able to ignore those. And so it's going to be that much more important that we double down and we support my colleagues and friends in the state legislature on the fight to protect our public schools and make sure that Abbott actually spends money funding our education at home because I think this Department of Education fight is going to be proactive and protracted. You know, it's been part of the Republican strategy to dumb down America, to restrict what people learn, to not teach factual history, to try to affect the progressive thinking of equality for all people, of the struggles of African American people, the struggles of LGBT people, the struggles of women, and just erase these times of history. And they're trying to rewrite that. And it's just, this attack on education should not be surprising. We've seen it I've seen it in the state legislature now for the past couple cycles with CRT and other issues on trying to restrict what people could be taught. And so it's something that we all need to be vicious about in terms of our defense of. We cannot have the next generation be dumber than the previous one. We can't have the next generation not engaged in critical thinking, not being able to engage truth from fiction and hypothesis and grow and develop and come up with that next new cure, that next new theory, that next new scientific breakthrough that transforms our society. And so it's just something that we all have to protect viciously. And, you know, we're going to do that here in every way possible.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you want to ask a question, please press *3. And if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6. The next question comes from Colin from Plano, talking about probationary federal employee. As a probationary federal employee for the FBA, he asks, will Texas try to fight federal employees being fired without cause?
Will Texas try to fight for federal employees being fired without cause? You know, we're obviously standing up as the Democratic caucus for all federal employees. There are protocols on how protected civil servants can be dismissed. There's pathways of there's administrative ways that you can terminate people. There's certain classifications of employees that have enhanced protected status. But my staff recently met with the Federal Employees Union and heard about all these reports, and we're engaging with the EPA Region 6 offices in Dallas as well on some of these concerns that have been brought to our attention. But we have to really protect our federal civil servants. You know, I'm also very concerned of what's happening in our CIA staff. You know, it takes years to recruit and train CIA staff in multiple languages to be proficient, to embed in our national security, and they're just being yanked. It is outrageous. They're being compromised. Their lives could be in danger. And this is a very alarming activity that the Trump administration is doing. And it's something that we all really need to be brought to light. And so, Colin, if you have personal stories of other employees that you can help share with us, we are really trying to gather data. We're trying to gather information, and we would love to hear more from you.
Our next question comes from Allison from Dallas. What do you perceive members of Congress to be responsive to? Is there anything that will sway Republicans to listen to concerns about Trump's antics?
Well, they need to hear from their constituents. They need to hear from people. Their phones need to ring off the wall. But the thing is that the federal government, I think any objective person would say that it is not an efficient organization, that there's way too much bureaucracy, way too much red tape, things cost too much, and it's a difficult entity to function with. And reforms have definitely needed. And Trump campaigned on this everywhere he went. He told everybody what he was going to do. And so many of his followers and Republicans feel like we do need to clean out waste, fraud, and abuse from the federal government. And yes, there are programs that don't make sense anymore, that probably should have been turned out, and there probably needed to have been a comprehensive review. But this is a completely inappropriate way to go about doing that. In normal appropriations process, there would be 12 different appropriations bills based on the various articles that the appropriation cover, and health, Army, defense, all the things. And then they should undertake a thorough review of various programs to determine, is this necessary, is this warranted, is this furthering American interest, yes or no? Then it needs to be done at the congressional level. And it has not been. And it has not been done under Democrats. It has not been done under Republicans. And we find ourselves in this situation where people who are deficit hawks and who are very concerned about that think this is great. And so the problem is a lot of folks on the Republican side, they're getting cheered from home. They're thinking this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. And so it's really, really important to mobilize communications. People ask me all the time, does it make a difference if we call your office? It absolutely makes a difference if you call our office. It makes a difference if Republicans' offices are getting called. Flood our senators with calls. Y'all need to be calling Cornyn and Cruz's office every day. They need to hear from you. The Republican, if you live in a Republican district, if you're not just from 32, call their offices or call them anyway. And, the members in the Metroplex. If you have organized reach outs to Republican members of Congress, but they need to hear from people loud and clear that they're concerned about this, and that is the most effective way to reach them.
Thank you very much. As a reminder, if you want to ask a question, please press *3, and if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6. The next question comes from Jeff from Dallas, saying he works in a union environment. What can you do to save the NLRB given Trump's recent actions?
Wow, that's a good question. We recently sent a letter. I signed on to it, that every member of the Labor Caucus, which I'm a member of, by the way, we sent a letter to Trump asking him to reverse that decision. The firing of NLRB member Will Cox was unprecedented and illegal, and it violates the National Labor Relations Standards Act, and where members can only be fired for neglect or malfeasance, and neither one of those was the basis for Will Cox firings. I firmly anticipate that being reversed in the courts as well, just because it's so blatantly disregard of the NLRB statute and what's involved there. But we definitely need to get that position back on the NLRB board. And I think we probably have time for more, right?
Yep. We have time for one final question. And as a reminder, if you would like to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6. The next question is from Janice from Richardson. She says Representative Scott Perry is trying to get rid of the $35 cap on insulin. She's a senior who has type 1 diabetes, and she says that the insulin is so helpful. How are you trying to protect this and push back?
Well, the $35 insulin cap keeps so many people alive, and it's one of the critical aspects of President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act that was passed to have that $35 cap in Medicare. And fortunately, that is the law. Again, it is the law. It's in the books. Medicare has not stopped that yet. I do think that Republicans are reticent to go after benefits in Medicare, and because, you know why? Seniors vote more than other people, and this was a hard-fought win. I would be stunned if that cap actually went away, because I do think that there's pretty bipartisan support to keep that in place. It keeps people safe. It keeps people healthy. And obviously, you know, I've been a strong advocate for health care access, and will do absolutely everything within my power to make sure that that stays in place. We're about out of time, but I just wanted to thank each one of you for joining us on this call. We have a ton of folks on here. It's so invigorating to see so many of you reach out and engage with us. Tonight, again, big thanks to Monica Lara Bravo for sharing all of your wealth of expertise and insightful information on the immigration issue. And for those folks out there who have so many concerns in that, I hope her presentations tonight answered several of your questions that you had out there. You know, my final message to you all is we're here. We want to hear from you. We're just as pissed off as you are. We're just as mad as you are. And we are speaking up about it everywhere we can. I give as many interviews as I can. I talk to everyone I can. I go to every meeting I can. I go to every hearing I can, just to try to figure out every opportunity that we have up here to stop what is happening. We have to unite. We have to become one voice. Please amplify what we're doing. You can follow us on all of the social media channels. We are at Rep. Julie Johnson and Julie Johnson TX on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, all the places. Engage, tell your stories, engage others, talk to people. People are worried. You know, I was so upset the other day when I met with an agency whose job is to do Meals on Wheels. 6,500 seniors would not have a meal to eat if these programs stop. Many times that's the only meal they have, and many times it's the only person they see. We have to be neighbors. This is a time when we have to come together as people and care and listen and be shoulders of strength and support, and also be willing to talk to others when you need it. Know that you can always reach us, but you have my commitment to work relentlessly on these issues till we know that we have a federal government that is honoring its commitments to the people it serves and to those throughout the world. We have an obligation. We are the strongest, the wealthiest country on earth, and we could do so much better than what we're doing right now. It is my deepest honor to serve you in the United States Congress. I look forward to seeing you when I'm back in Dallas, although they don't let me out of here very often. I wish they would let me out of here more than they do. But we are up here. I have a very capable, brilliant staff. We have staff in the district. We have staff here in D.C. who are ready and willing to help you with whatever may arise. I appreciate your confidence, and please stay in touch with us. We definitely want to hear from you, and we're definitely here to help you. Thank you again for your participation tonight. I look forward to hearing from you very soon. And don't forget to hit *6 to subscribe to our newsletter. You guys take really good care out there and be safe. Good night.
Thank you, Congresswoman. On behalf of our office, I'd like to thank everyone for joining this call tonight. Before you go, please stay on the line if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter but haven't talked to a team member yet. You'll be able to leave a message with your email momentarily. Thank you again for joining. This ends tonight's Telephone Town Hall with Congresswoman Julie Johnson.